Well, what's changed in the last couple months for BC Tenancy then? Can we just kind of review it and dig into some?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've seen over, and hey, I'm a history, political science dropout student, but in the end, we all know there's a little bit of politics going on here
Yeah.
in votes. That's a personal statement. You could probably poke holes in that. But in the end, as of July 18th, how do you get rid of someone that doesn't deserve to be gone, i.e., not paying rent and those sorts
Yeah.
of things? And what people have been using is what's called the 13.1 clause, landlord use of property, where someone moves in, or your mom or dad or sister or brother, something like
Mhm.
that, where it's a 2 months notice, 1 month compensation. You've got to stay there for 6 months in good faith. Let's make sure I state that. And we can always go back to what is good faith. In the end, the government has doubled down and now made that a 4 month notice, 1 month compensation. Someone needs to stay there not 6 months, but 12 months. And the person or the owner needs to go into a government registry and put in a whole bunch of details. I haven't done it yet because it's hot off the press as of 6 days ago, to
Yeah.
state who's there, all the above, where it's really just holding the owners more accountable to the ones that I call are trying to pull a fast one. Well, what family member? What about this? And I don't think it's rampant in the industry. It's the bad apple ruining
Yeah.
it for
I
everyone
agree with
else.
Yeah.
that. I agree with that
Right? It's
totally.
not everybody. There are very classic cases, but people will then just use the card. Oh, and just to note too, if a tenant wants to fight that, it's 30 days, not 15. So those are the main keys where they get an extra couple weeks to kind of fight it. Is it going to change everything? It's going to make people think a little bit twice, but the idea is to kind of close off people who are just being unfaithful and not being in good faith based on the eviction process. Do I think it's going to change that much? No, it's not so much the notice. I think having to fill out the registry and really be a little bit more transparent. I don't want those people to, do things in bad faith. But from an investor's point of view, a bird's eye view, and I have these chats with people, it is making investors think twice about investing in this province because the red tape is heavy.
Yeah.
And, you could say the deck of cards are stacked against you. And that goes back to, it just makes it more challenging, but it also maybe reiterates that you need a licensed professional if you're going to get in the game. And I'm not saying come to me, go to someone else, but if you're going to do it yourself and you don't know the laws, you could easily get slapped, even when you're in good faith, because you just didn't know. Where I've seen cases where, man, 12-month penalty times $3,000 a month. I've seen cases where people have to pay $36,000 to the tenant only because they saw it back on marketplace and they're going for the gusto.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm biased, but I'm in arbitration cases, and boy, sometimes I'm like, how does the tenant get all this when they didn't even submit their evidence? Okay.
I have a client that just lost because he evicted the tenant to move there himself, and then he hasn't lived there enough that the arbitration found. So he had to pay a year's rent. So like he did live there, he just wasn't living there enough. So like
And I've even heard cases when it was 6 months, people would be there 8 months, but you weren't there in good faith, right? And how do you debate good faith? How do you legitimize good faith? Where they were there even further than the law 6 months. So in the new law, let's say you stayed there 14 months, but for some reason you couldn't provide the evidence of good faith, which one could argue is subjective.
yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, but I watched a lot of Law and Order as a kid. And obviously I'm like a lawyer in arbitration, where that is super scary because, how
Yeah.
do you argue that good faith? And you really need to have your ducks in a row. And that's going to investors, having a very good licensed professional,
Yeah.
not just a professional that has their license, someone where you interview, their history, they're serious, that can properly give you the reassurance to be successful on your behalf.
So
Yeah.
just a kind of a, I don't know, observation here, but like the changes that happen with the tenancy are really all seem to be about getting the tenant out. But like my point of view, when you buy a rental property, like you buy it for the long term. Like when I buy a rental property or when I advise my clients, it's not to hold the rental property for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then sell it. It's to basically hold it forever and refinance it as it gains appreciation, right? So like, do you think we're still in a good environment to invest like that?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think why this is magnified is when I started, rent prices were A. right?
Yep.
And then they all went up like 40%.
Yeah.
And this is what kind of spiked. And, I don't know when the government reviewed this, but governments are historically slow in policy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they're reacting to what happened even 2, 3 years ago when everything spiked 30, 40% in rental increases, in the generalized market. And they're looking at their place going, hey, tenant Dave, you're paying 1,800 and I like you, but I can now get 2,500,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think this is what started it all, where, now we're seeing, the market's gone down a little bit or corrected itself a little bit, 18, 20%, where now we're really just in this ebb and flow of the property management world or the rental price. It's
Yep.
stayed pretty stable over the last year, except for our seasonal changes. So my answer is yes. We're just seeing a bit of a reaction to this crazy market of going up and then reacting where, nowadays, majority of new owners specifically and new investors are saying, okay, yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. I just think the saliva of the owners that have been around for 5+ years, the capitalistic nature, which in their argument, my fees have gone up, my mortgage has gone up, all the above. I really think it's going to settle out and we're going to be more in a stable market where you're not going to have screaming tenants, because this is also why this has occurred, because the cost of living has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Bottom line.